All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Rise Up Animation podcast. I'm Pontillas. I'm an artist, designer, and director in animation, and I'm so happy you guys are here with us. Today, we are diving into the topic of thriving in uncertain times. And I'm so excited to be joined by the incredibly talented Minkyu Lee. Minkyu, thank you, and welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, no, thank you so much, Bobby, to for inviting me into your space, and also good to see you. It's been a while.
I know it's been 50 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But no, thank
brief.
you so much for having me over. Yeah,
Dude, it's
happy
an
to do
honor
it.
for me, man. It's great to see you again, dude.
Yeah,
To be
good to see
honest,
you
I mean,
too.
like on a personal level, but Minkyu Lee is an Oscar-nominated animation director, designer, and animator. Um, yeah, we met at Disney way back on Wreck-It Ralph. When I came
Yeah.
out to
Wow.
LA, I was working as an animator. And Mickey, what were you doing on Wreck-It Ralph?
I was a visual development artist, mainly doing character designs on Wreck-It
Ooh,
Ralph. Yeah.
okay, okay, good. I
Yeah.
knew you were an animator before that, though.
Yes, so I started as an animator on Princess and the Frog, an animation apprentice technically, but we were all animating scenes, all the animation apprentices on Princess and the Frog, and
Oh my
then
gosh.
after that, an animator on the Winnie the Pooh film that they did that was hand
Yeah,
drawn, and
yeah.
then after that, they kind of just told us, all of us who are hand drawn animators, so we're probably not going to do any more hand drawn animated films. You either have the option to do CG animation and we can train you in that, or
Hmm.
you can, if you want to, you can go to different departments like story or viz dev, but you're going to
Yeah,
have to, create your own portfolio, of
yeah,
course, and like get accepted by those departments. And so
yeah.
I, like drawing, and so I just made my own character design portfolio and submitted that to the art department at Disney. And yeah, they put me on Frozen back when it was called Snow Queen, based off of
Hmm.
that portfolio. And so I was on Frozen slash Snow Queen for a while, and then they moved me to Wreck-It Ralph. So that must have been when we first met.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that is wild too, man, because you how was it like switching departments? I mean, like I think the bigger question is just kind of like you came up like wanting to do this one thing and then like things
Yeah.
shifted, industry shifted, and you shifted.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, totally. So, are you asking about like what was it like to go from animation to viz dev to development to that whole journey, or just more recently now, like the shift that
Oh
I
no,
made
no, no.
now?
I think like back in the day, like what was your thinking?
Yeah.
Like how did you were you like in a thrive mentality? I just kind of like things are changing. I need to
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah. Oh, you mean when Disney pretty much announced that they wouldn't do any more, they have no more 2D
Correct.
hand. Yeah.
Correct.
Um,
Correct.
yeah, I think, you know, at that time, all the animators, we weren't dumb either. We were looking at the studio response to the reception of the box office reception of Princess and the Frog, and
Yeah.
while we were making Winnie the Pooh, the
Yeah.
studio, I remember many times saying, we're not expecting this to be like a gajillion dollar hit, and so I think the writing was on the wall, so it was a little bit easier for at least for me to be like, okay, so this is probably ending. And, in the end, for me, I like drawing anyway. So as long as I can draw to some capacity, I would have been happy.
Yeah.
But also working on Princess and the Frog and Winnie the Pooh as a character animator, you know, um, when it comes to like the production pipeline, that's like so down the pipeline, right? Like that's not like early, that's not development stuff. You're not
Yeah.
actually like really contributing and molding the story. You're just kind of moving around what's already there. And
Yeah.
I think once I was in that process, I didn't feel satisfied
Mm,
by like that process for me because it just felt like I'm just handed a scene and I'm
yeah.
just moving characters around, and
Yeah.
that just didn't satisfy what I thought I would be doing, which was like meaningfully contributing to the story, actually like writing some parts of the story. I think that's what I really wanted to do. Of
Yeah.
course, really wanted to do was direct, and that was always what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know, animating is kind of so far removed from directing to
Yeah.
compare to say like writing or storyboarding or development. And so I think I was happy to trace the step backs of production, meaning that going one step earlier than animation into
Hmm.
visual development,
Hmm.
because then I felt a little bit more like, oh, I'm actually like molding the world here.
Hmm.
I get
Hmm.
to have a say on what the characters look like
Hmm.
and things like that. And of course,
Yeah.
even that only lasted like a couple years. And then I was like, no, 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 but I want to actually get to like decide who the characters even get to
Mhm,
be, you
mhm,
know?
mhm,
And
mhm,
so my
mhm.
final gig at Disney was doing very early development on Moana.
Moana, dude,
So
that can I
yeah.
just interject really quickly? Those Moana
Oh,
pieces that
sure.
you did, phenomenal, man. I think
Oh,
like
thank
that did
you.
more for the movie and for the artists that worked on the movie than anything else. That early
Oh my
expression that you did
gosh.
on the Moana stuff, and it wasn't even just the character design stuff, and it wasn't just the visuals. I think it was just the story moments and everything that I saw that you were doing upstairs. I'm like, this guy, man, and it was
Oh,
just
thanks.
so inspiring. And I think that for Moana specifically, I mean, like you're just kind of the undercover, just kind of like tone setter for that, man. And I truly believe that. I'm not even saying that like casually. When I see these drawings, I still
Oh,
see
thank
those
you.
drawings on Pinterest sometimes, and I'm like,
Yeah.
bro, determine the style of like the tone of like that movie. Working with
Yeah,
Ron and John, who
yeah.
we love also. So
Yes, yes. I think that was the most fun part aspect for me was, in the beginning, it was just like I want to say the five of us. It was Ron, John, me, and Fawn,
mhm,
um, and Jennifer Lee,
mhm,
who at that point hadn't even went on to Frozen yet. So this was when Jen
yeah,
was right off of Wreck-It Ralph, and they just put us in one room and they
yep.
said, "How about like an adventure film set in Polynesia, and maybe the main protagonist is a okay, go, And
Yeah, yeah.
so it was just the five of us for a little while, and then quickly the studio moved Jen from Moana to Frozen, and then she
Frozen,
would
yeah.
later on go to direct Frozen, of course. But
Yeah,
so after that was just the four of us, me, Fawn, and Ron and John,
yeah,
in this tiny little story room, just kind
yeah,
of yeah, just being like, what if it could be like this? What if it could be like that? And
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Ron and John are just so wonderful. And one of my most cherished memories at Disney is definitely just getting to be in a room with Ron and John and just asking all the questions that I wanted to about, the Nine Old Men and the Disney
That's
in the
so
80s.
wild.
Like, what was it like making Little
Yeah,
Mermaid?
dude,
All of those things.
dude, a
So
hundred
that
percent,
was definitely the best time. Yeah.
dude, 100%. When I got to Disney, I was
Yeah.
like, "Yo, I'm a geek out. I do not care."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Here's Eric
Yeah, yeah.
Goldberg.
And they were
Here's,
so
dude. Yeah, a hundred
yeah,
percent.
totally. And they were so like open to sharing all the different stories of, everything that went down. And so that's definitely my favorite memory.
Right
Just to
on,
just
man.
being there. I think
Dude, right
like
on, man.
six,
So,
8 months. Yeah.
dude, I that was a moment. That was an era
Yeah,
that
that
we had
was a
met. It's
moment.
different now, but I look on that with fond memories. I'm sure it's cool now. But
Yeah.
later, Minkyu was actually my talent development mentor. You remember that, man?
Yeah, I remember
Um,
that. Yeah, because you
just
you
look,
went through a similar step too. You went from animation to visual
yeah,
development. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Which is wild because I like to do both, and so I
Yeah.
applied to
And
this
yeah.
talent development like program, and they set me
Mhm.
up with Minkyu as my mentor, as a character design mentor, and he kind of came in, and it was awesome, man. I remember you came in for 2 weeks, and then you got nominated. This is part of the intro. Minkyu got nominated for like Adam and Dog, and so that kind of like set him off on that for anyone who doesn't know, once you're nominated for an Oscar, there's all kinds of extravagance and events that you attend and tours and
You get
all that kind
swept
of
up
stuff.
by the tornado, Oscar tornado. It just like it
Yeah.
just like sweeps you up, and you're like, what? Like there's like 50,000 things.
Is
Yeah,
that that's wild, huh?
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah,
I remember I was like Minkyu was assigned my mentor, and when he got nominated, I was like, please go do your thing. Please kind of live this moment and that kind of stuff. And so he went on and if y'all haven't seen Adam and Dog, check it out. Is it available on YouTube? Mm,
yeah, yeah. It should be
okay,
available
cool.
on
Awesome,
YouTube.
man.
But
Phenomenal.
yeah,
And then since then, we've gone on to do a wide variety of things in animation outside of Disney,
yeah,
and though we have really haven't had the chance to work together, it's great to catch up with you again, man. So like, why this conversation? So I wanted to kind of hold this space for us, and I'm really grateful and thankful for you to kind of like hold the time for us. And so it kind of started
thank
of
you.
like we hold these Rise Up animation panels,
Mhm.
maybe a few a year, and we have a Q&A portion at the end of it. And so in the last panels we've had during the Q&A portion of the community, it's very clear that like there's a lot of uncertainty and anxiety about the animation industry, especially like among students and those looking to kind of break in. And honestly, me too, actually, to be
Yeah,
fair.
of course. Yeah, totally.
And man, with kind of like the layoffs and the rise of
Yeah,
AI, it's kind of understandable to feel uncertain and things can look bleak. And we'll touch on this a little bit later. You go on IG and everyone's dark, it's a kind of like a dark aspect of just kind of the future for animation, and that's why I kind of think it's super important to just kind of continue this conversation, Minkyu, and try to offer, in the dark times, offer some light to the community. And when
yeah,
I heard your podcast, I was like, I mean, this is just such a refuge, just kind of like a nice break from every negative thing I've been hearing. And from someone
Mhm.
I look up to, a hero of mine, I respect. So some advice and actionable steps on how to navigate and thrive in these like changing times, man. And
Yeah,
which brings me to some very valuable insights you've shared on this topic that really connected with me. And if you don't mind, I'll quote you here and then we can kind of
yeah,
expand
please.
on them
Oh gosh.
together.
Yeah,
Uh
yeah, totally.
yeah. So the first one is don't rely on corporations, studios, or any outer authority to provide stability for you.
Yes. Yeah. So, so for some of you who might not know, actually, many of you who might not know, alongside being an animation artist and a film director, I'm also an astrologer and human design reader. Um, and a lot of these insights I get from those modalities, because I totally understand a lot of the professional industry reaction towards what's happening right now might come from a lot of industry professional, like veteran experience. But I am a firm believer that that type of experience doesn't account for unprecedented events, which we see around us all the time. And that's where, I have a whole other story about like how I got into astrology and the years I spent studying it and human design. But ultimately, after in my own process, rigorously testing these modalities, I have really come to, uh, at least for me, really see the validity in them. And so the big thing about, and you can, if you are curious about how I got these conclusions, you can listen to them a little bit more on the podcast that I created. It's just like one single episode and it's free and it's
Yeah.
available on my Substack and Patreon. But one of the things about human design is that right now we are going through a big global cycle shift, that actually the current global cycle that we're in ends in 2027, and in 2027 there's a brand new global cycle, and one of the big keynotes of that is, kind of the breakdown or deterioration of corporations and studios and institutions and things like that, including, banks, hospitals, schools, like anything. And that definitely includes corporations like studios. And so because these institutions are going to be continuously more and more unreliable, relying on the previous strategy that we were all taught and conditioned with, which was you go to an prestigious animation school, you get that degree. That degree is going to be the door to you getting a job at that prestigious animation company. And once you are at that animation studio or company, you pretty much work there until you retire, and then afterwards you enjoy your retirement. That whole lifestyle is what is going away. And that's not just in animation, but that is really globally across all sorts of different industries. And so that's where I derive that kind of prediction or forecast of,
Hmm.
because studios are going to become more and more unreliable and unstable, um, relying on those previous strategies of like, but I need a job to survive, I need a
Yeah.
job for healthcare, whatever.
Yeah.
That's going to yield with more frustration, more bitterness, more anger, more disappointment, So that's why I really strongly advise anyone who's listening to kind of in your own way, reimagine the animator lifestyle,
Yeah.
because we've been only fed, especially in the West Coast animation industry that we're all a part of,
Yeah.
we've only been fed one model. So we only think this one model of being an animation artist is what is possible and viable, when
Yep.
in reality, because there is just a lot of changes that are going to be coming in the next handful of years.
Yep.
Um, it's going to require a lot of deeper kind of realignment, I think. Yeah.
And with
So
that,
it's
with the next thing, that just like, dude, that's
Mhm.
right up with your next thing of just kind of, this is a big one, but I think that's something that really connected with me is begin to decondition from the homogenizing influences of the animation industry and get back in touch with your uniqueness and authenticity, which is huge,
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Because and the reason why is because, again, similarly, as we were fed this one lifestyle and conditioned by, hey, this is what the animation lifestyle looks like. This is what it looks like to be an animator and work at one company for, 40 years or however many years.
Yeah.
That comes along with the need to be able to be a small cog in a giant wheel of a
Yep.
studio, right? So everyone kind of has to get in line and adjust their own authenticity in exchange for survival and security, right?
Yep.
Well, when that survival and security is taken away from us, yeah, in the beginning it might feel a little bit destabilizing,
Hmm.
but what comes is, well, the opportunity to actually create what you wanted to create, because that homogenization, when you decide, oh, I want to be an animator, I want to make animated films, it starts very, very early. I actually think it starts from the moment you craft your very first portfolio to even
Yeah, yeah,
apply
yeah,
to an
yeah.
animation
For
school.
sure, for
Because,
sure.
yeah, because the moment you do that, you are reorienting your artwork towards the other. It's not no longer about what you want to express. It's about, well, what's going to
Yeah,
get me into this school? So
yeah,
from there starts this conditioning process of, you know, I call it installing like a filter in your creative mind, where suddenly
mm,
your creative expression doesn't get to just really express itself, but now it has to go through this filter, and the filter's voice is, well, what will the administrators of this art school think? What will my peers think? What will my instructors think? And then once you start applying to jobs, it's like, what will the studios think? What will the director think? What will the executive think? And because you're reorienting your creative process to the other, to these outer authorities, um, my honest theory is that a lot of really the majority of the animation industry right now and what they're creating is not truly authentically their expression, but it's kind of this compromised, adjusted, filtered, almost distorted version of like creating for like audience expectation, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
that's fine if you want to do that in exchange for like financial stability or security, but it also comes with, I think, that loss of authentic creative expression, which is why you wanted to do it in the first place, you know?
Hmm.
Uh, so, but in the future, because you know, the being a more homogenized living a more homogenized style of living, whether that be, you know, trying to be again just one small cog in a giant wheel, or trying to create for like an outer authority, because that is going to become less and it's going to yield less and less security and stability. I mean, we're already seeing that right now, right?
Yeah.
Um, that is no longer going to be the way to really thrive in the future. But instead, what's even better is that in the future, what will allow you to really thrive is your authentic expression, because people are just going to be much more drawn to pure authenticity. And I think that's what we are slowly seeing right now
Hmm.
in even just the social media landscape.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
Yeah, yeah, no, no. I remember like building off that deconditioning yourself from the homogenization of like the animation industry. I remember when you were my mentor and I would present like designs. We're gonna embarrass both of ourselves. So like I would present to you like designs and you'd be like, these are well drawn, but they kind of look like things that have been done before. And so I think
yeah,
it's just kind of like one of those things where you're just trying to hustle and just trying to make it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
you're like, this studio will like this, or these art directors will like this, and that kind of stuff. And I remember you as a
That goes
mentor.
for my own artwork too, you know, like when I look back on pretty much everything that I did, I can see that I was, you know, trying to fit my style into a certain mold that would, you
Mm,
know, get the approval for
yeah.
from my boss, from whoever. You know, it wasn't, I don't think it was necessarily my pure expression of creative desire.
Mm,
And
mhm,
after being in that environment, like just being immersed in that kind of environment for, you know, in our case, like a decade, like that really, I think, you know, takes you away from what that original spark was. And so
mm,
for me, I am continuously on this journey of like re-excavating or
mm,
just like digging down back and just taking off all these layers right now of like,
mhm.
yeah, but what did you actually want to create, and recentering myself as the audience,
Yeah,
rather than recentering, you know, this imaginary audience as the audience, you know, that
correct.
I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
going to
Mhm.
be a process that I would definitely recommend for anybody, you know, moving forward.
How did you come across that? Like, was it hard in the beginning to kind of,
Yeah.
because we're in the studio system, was it hard for you to break away from the studio system while being in the studio system?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I want to also say that it might not just be the studio system, but even like the social media art landscape, because
Mm,
we can so often value what we create via the engagement and the likes and comments that we get. That is another form of creating for outer authority, you know.
mm,
Um, and I think that becomes its own very powerful conditioning factor for a lot of artists, because suddenly they're like, well, if I draw this, then I'm going to get more likes. You know,
mm-hmm,
that
mm-hmm,
can also be
mm-hmm,
like a conditioning factor. But
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
uh,
mm-hmm.
yeah, I think for me, you know, because I've gone through all of that too and gone through all those
Yeah,
experiences,
me too, man.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, I
like,
can
I
relate,
mean, even
man.
if you,
Yeah, all kinds
yeah, I'm
of,
sure you can.
yeah,
I'm
just
sure
studio
many.
approval kind of like bits, dude. Oh man. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I
100%. Sorry,
know.
go ahead.
And
Yeah, yeah.
no, no, totally. And just to share like a personal story too, like when
Yeah,
I
please.
first opened Instagram way back when too, like I was like, oh, I need like thousands and thousands of followers and I know how to get them. If I do these types of like fan arts very well, then I'm gonna get that engagement and I'm gonna get the audience that I want. And I did, when I first opened my Instagram, I did like the Sailor Moon, Game of Thrones, like Marvel fan art, and that would get like tens of thousands of like
Yeah,
likes and stuff. But in
100%.
the
Yeah,
end,
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
once I looked back on my Instagram and saw that that was my basically body of art, there was just this incredible, undeniable feeling of like satisfaction. I was like, no, this is not me. And
Mm,
so I deleted everything. And that was a huge lesson for me in terms of like, for me, it really isn't about the quantity of engagement, but the quality of engagement,
mhm,
unless it is very meaningful engagement. Like, I'm just
mhm,
not the type of artist to be ever satisfied with like, this looks so cool. Oh my gosh,
mhm,
this is the best
mhm,
fan art of Sailor Moon I've ever seen. That means
mhm,
nothing to me. That's the big that I learned. And when I look back on all the art that really moved me and I really connected to, it had nothing to do with that kind of engagement,
mm,
and
mm,
so
mm.
that was, I think, my first hint. That was the first nudge for me to kind of really reorient myself, and um something in my soul saying like, no, you are meant to do other things.
Oh,
And
woo!
of
Love
course,
it. Love it.
yeah, like
It's like a dagger to my soul, Minkyu.
I think
Dang.
that's a lot of us. Again, because we can get so swept up in, again, in that tornado of social media engagement. And it's like, ooh, I did this drawing and that got
Yeah.
me 24,000 likes. I'm gonna do more of that. Suddenly you're chasing that engagement rather than, well, is it actual meaningful engagement to you? Are the people saying I really see you,
Right,
And
right, right.
so
Love it,
that
man.
that was my first. Yeah, go
No,
ahead, please.
no, you're good. You're good. You're good. Wonderful, man. I think that kind of ties into finding your true authentic community, which is another like quote that you had, and pretty straightforward. Yeah, yeah. I mean, find it.
Yeah, so that comes from, again, and please excuse me if I refer a
No,
lot
dude,
to
you're good. You're good.
human design and things like that, because that's a
You're
lot
good.
of where I derive these from. But in the human design system, there is something called fractal lines. And I know this is going to get really technical, but basically in the cosmology of human design, it's like
Mhm.
you have your soul tribe. And
Mm,
these are the types of people, and human design puts it in a really interesting way where it's like, you have those people that no matter how much you try to persuade them and talk and you're trying to speak your truth, like they don't get you, or they just don't understand you. I mean, a lot of
mm.
times family members can be like that. It's like you're trying to like tell them like, this is how it is and this is what I want to do. But it's like the
100%.
conversation like this, it's
Yep.
like
Yep.
you'll say something, they'll understand it a completely different way. And that's because, those people might not be your fractals, they might not be on your fractal. But when
Mm,
you are talking to someone who is on your fractal line,
mm.
then there's this response of like, oh my God, totally, I understand what you're saying. Now tell me more. They want more
Right.
of your idea and your interpretation of what in human design calls the neutrino stream.
Yeah.
And that's basically your interpretation of reality. They want more of your interpretation of reality. Um, and what human design says, in the future, those connections, those true, authentic, genuine fractal connections, is what's going to sustain you more
Yeah.
than inauthentic, well, I'm going to trade my authenticity for survival and security at a larger studio type
Yeah.
connections, because that's not going to be stable and secure anymore,
Yeah.
increasingly so.
Yep.
But the only way you can find your fractals if you show up to the world purely authentically. And
Yeah.
that's what is so hard for a lot of us, is because we show up in this more filtered, manufactured versions of ourselves. Because again,
100%.
we have a mental filter that says, well, I can't say this, even though I really want to say it. I can't say
Yeah,
this because
yeah,
of A,
yeah,
B, and
yeah, yeah.
C, and maybe this studio is watching, whatever,
Yeah, yeah,
our
yeah.
version of that.
Yeah, yeah.
but actually right now more than ever, that's what people are wanting. And so um
Yeah. Yeah, for
but to
sure.
get to that point again, to get to that genuine expression takes a lot of deconditioning practice. And even for me, after like several years of like being
Dude,
mindful and bringing awareness to that,
dude,
I'm like, oh my gosh, there's still so much of
dude, a
filtering and
hundred
I'm
percent. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
being conditioned by, you know?
Yeah.
So but that's why it's going to be so much more important in the future for people to just really show up with their authentic truth, is because only when you show up truly as your authentic self will you find your authentic tribe, you
Yeah.
know. And I think that's the other thing that I really learned from animation too, is like
Yeah.
when you are at a studio, and you're put on a team, most likely that is not your authentic tribe. You know, I can pretty much
Hmm.
guarantee, because you didn't get to have a say. You basically presented a filtered version of yourself to the studio to say, hey, use me to do this specific part of this giant machine. And the
Ooh.
studio placed you. So that's the outer authority placing you, which is why I
Dang.
think every animation production, whether it be TV show, film, right now is strife with there's so much drama and like
Hmm. Hmm.
corporate toxic bullshit right now in the animation industry. Well, that's because you're not in the correct environment for you, you
Yeah.
know, because when you are in the correct environment for you, what you will experience is ease and no resistance, you know. But you know,
That's one of
I
the things that I admired about you, that you just kind of chase after your own path, like outside of Disney and outside of any studio, and trying to find your own voice. And I'll see you resurface like on Variety occasionally and be like, Minkyu was like doing his thing, man.
yeah,
Which leads me to the next Minkyu, words of wisdom, nuggets of wisdom. Create more options for yourself, but not from
yeah,
a place of survival or strategy, only from
yeah,
authentic interest, passion, and joy. I think
yeah.
that spoke to me as well, man. I mean, like, being a studio guy, like in the past, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, and again, part of the reason for that is because a lot of times, especially for us in animation, we can fall prey to, you know, the sunk cost fallacy of like, well, my career is in animation. I spent all this money uh into my education in animation, like I'm building my career in animation, so I better stick to this one lane. But in reality, you know, the future we're moving into, you know, I know it's so easy to talk about the future just from our animation bubble, but you know, what I genuinely believe is that in the next, you know, few years to a decade or so, we are going to see a lot of changes in just, you know, the global paradigm. And so these older strategies of just like sticking to one lane is probably not going to be as stable for you.
Yeah.
And I actually believe that universal intelligence or the universe or God, whatever you want to call it, is actually seeding the correct desires and hopes and new dreams for you right now. But a lot of times we can deny those when it's like actually accepting that call will actually put you in a much happier and better space. And for me, just one example that I bring up is like
Yeah.
my astrology human design business, you know, that just having that. And I started that when I was actually a film director directing a feature film at Netflix. You know, that's when I
Hmm.
started that. When I was like, I had that job that was, you know, consuming most of my time. I
Hmm.
still felt this deep calling, and so I really leaned into that um, interest or passion, what have you, because
Yeah.
it just did give me a lot of joy and I had so much energy for it. And I just loved doing readings for people and seeing it resonate and seeing it help people.
Hmm.
Um, and thank God that I did, because that in its own way has become its own whole other trajectory that has opened new doors for me that I would have
Wow.
never anticipated if I would just stayed in animation because of the sunk
Wow.
cost fallacy.
Yep. Yep.
And because
Yep.
of that, I feel like I don't have to take on every single animation job that comes my way
Yeah.
anymore. Now I get to just say no if the job doesn't feel aligned to me, and 95% of the jobs that come to me don't feel aligned to me, And but if I was just in animation, I can easily imagine myself having that sense of desperation of like, I just need to find a job. I need to say yes to every job that comes to me.
Yeah.
That's only going to put me again in that wrong environment, and is going to be uh, an incredibly frustrating experience, probably. That is going to be short-lived and more of like a short-term band-aid, because it's probably going to end in like 3 months or 6 months. And then I'm going to go back to the place of desperation again. Um,
So
and
what would you say to an student newly graduated, wants to break in industries,
Mhm,
tumultuous? What would you say
mhm.
to them?
I would honestly say, like, don't try to, it's so weird, but don't try to gear your entire career, entire body of work towards getting a job. I
Mm,
would like, I actually have a lot of opinions about how the animation education system is probably going to have to be completely reoriented right now, because
mm,
every animation institution is still working off of that older model of,
mm,
well, just make that good portfolio, make that student film so that you can get a job,
mm,
Um,
mm,
but it's going to have to be completely reshifted into, how can we educate and train animation students so they can be self-sufficient? Does
mm,
that mean just, one thing that I'm doing, the trajectory that I'm doing, is making my own graphic novel
mhm,
online and sharing
mhm,
that through
mhm,
Patreon and Substack, which is its
mhm,
own monetary channel.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
I would recommend animation students do that now. So the
mm,
job doesn't become a necessity, but it just becomes an option for you. So it's like,
mm,
once in a while, when the right job comes along, yeah, if you feel called to it, then do it, and do it for the experience, but don't rely on that as your main breadwinner, because we are seeing more and more examples of, just even like in social media influencers who are able to survive off of just doing what they do. So I would definitely recommend that every animation student stop relying on outer authorities like studios or jobs, or gigs, to be their main source of income, and adapt a little bit more of that creative influencer creator model, and be your own source of income. So, you know, once in a while, when that freelance gig comes, yeah, sure, you can take it on, which I actually think the frequency of that is going to become less and less as we move into the future, as these studios adapt AI more rigorously, as we all know they will, because they're not gonna, no studio is gonna be like, oh, we got to think about the artist. No, they're not gonna do that. I think every studio right now is just lying in wait to pounce exactly when the moment that AI becomes a actual viable cinematic tool, which is, of course, it's not at this point. And we're recording this on June 22nd, 2024. It's not at this point. And I like to mention timestamps just because I'm like, no, we are going to see a lot of changes now. So, like,
100%, 100% every time.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
when I say, like, yeah, you can't really make a movie out of AI right now. Well, people who are listening to this podcast in a year, they're gonna be like, yeah, you can.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. It's gonna change
so
100%. Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
like, I think how
Another
it's,
sorry,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead,
Oh,
Mickey.
please, yeah. No, so I
Okay.
think how, just touching really quickly upon why I think even the I'm available for work, gig to gig type of lifestyle for animators are going to become even more competitive and more scarce, is because, I think these studios, which all of them are bleeding money at this point, um, once they start to really rigorously adapt AI, those freelance gigs are going to become more scarce, and the duration of those are going to be a lot shorter. It's just going to be like, hey, could you come in and take a look at this and just do your own consulting and give us some tips? All right, thank you, bye. So um, yeah, so all of that is to say, to start building a foundation for yourself where you do not need these outer studios, And another tip on top of that is that it is going to be possible. And I think the kind of downside of being too immersed in this kind of West Coast animation industry is that around you are only examples of people who are also struggling right now, probably, or who share that kind of same anxiety. Another advice would be to pull out of that a little bit and have a little bit more of a bird's eye view and start noticing, because there are plenty of influencers or creators out there who are self-sustaining, who are able to, you know, bring more income annually than the traditional studio job model just via what they create. So another advice would be to start really noticing those examples and start gravitating towards those examples and surrounding yourself with those types of examples, because if you only surround yourself in this echo chamber of, oh my God, AI is going to take all the jobs. What do we do? Oh my God, Adobe is, suddenly mandating we give up all our right. Like, if you just surround yourself in that echo chamber, then you're just going to spiral down that reality, because that's the only reality that you see. When over here in this world, everyone's having like a grand old time, not necessarily a grand old time, but like there are so many examples of people doing that. So that would be my other advice. Yeah.
That's one of the things that I liked about what you had to say on that podcast is just kind of like, okay, let's kind of acknowledge whatever's happening. What's the positive, like actionable next steps that we can do? And that's just kind of like where I kind of come from.
Mhm.
One of the things that really struck a chord with me that I really want to know, like personally for you. So you said honor your new dreams. And
Yeah.
first of all, I think that holds true to like anyone that's going through a transition. Just kind of like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I thought it was this. I can be more than that in this
Yeah.
environment and that kind of stuff. But I wanted to ask you, Minkyu, like, what does that look for you? What does honoring your new dreams like look for you?
Yeah, so I have so much to say about this topic, just because,
Yeah,
this is where headspace is at constantly. But,
love it.
one of the things that certainly comes to mind is I deeply believe that the future of animation is certainly not going to be like what we see now in terms of like a centralized city model. Like, so if you think about how the animation industry works right now, at least in America, all the jobs are in this one city, right? Los Angeles, Burbank. So all the animators are here. This is where all the studios are at, minus Pixar, but like Disney, DreamWorks, Nickelodeon, Netflix, cartoon, what have you, it's all here. Um, I think the future is going to be less congested like that in a city, and it's going to be more spread out. And my hope is that the future is going to be, yeah, again, less homogenized in that way, and a lot of people doing a lot of different things at a lot of different places. And so how I'm chasing my current dream right now is to certainly connect with my fractals or my authentic community, find those people right now via what I genuinely put out, and find a new city or a town, or a smaller town most likely. Because one of the other things that I think will happen, and I think we are seeing like the very beginnings of it, is the breakdown of the megacity. And this is one of the things that human design predicts, is that San Francisco, New York, LA, like all these megacities, because the infrastructure support is going to slowly not be there anymore, we are going to experience kind of like a deterioration or a rapid breakdown of these larger megacities,
And
which
so for
sounds
you,
daunting.
that's the metaphor
Scary.
for the bigger studios.
Yeah, it's the same thing, and again, I go a lot more into detail about the mechanics of all of this in my podcast that I put out.
Hmm.
That's called the future of the animation industry.
Yeah.
Um, but I think in return, what we're going to hopefully see is more smaller communities in rural areas thrive, And so right now I'm kind of in this journey with the next year of just finding a new place to root down. I call it my 1 foot out of LA, because I'm going to treat it like a transition, have
Mm.
1 foot in LA, home is here, but also have one foot out of LA that I can, maybe in the next 5, 7 years or so beginning to transition out of to create my own little animation studio or animation community, I think is the more correct word, because I also think this old model of everyone working on one film, like everyone get in line, get behind this one director's vision, and everyone just work on the same thing, play your little role. I think that model is going to go away. And what I think is going to be the new model is everyone creating their own thing individually, but together in like a community, if that makes sense. I mean, it's
Mhm.
kind of like the CalArts filmmaking model
Yeah.
where, you know, that was probably creatively my happiest moment in my life was when we're all making our own films, but we're
Yeah.
doing it together, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
individuals together is how I kind of coin it. Like I
Uh-huh.
actually think that would be a very positive potential version of the future of the animation industry. We're all creating our own individual films together. And
Yeah.
because we're supporting ourselves, we don't need to gain that $100 million box office opening, you know?
Hmm.
like like a tiny percentage of that would be enough to sustain ourselves annually, and
Hmm.
so that's my hope. And people,
Hmm.
I think, are going to be more creatively satisfied because
Hmm.
they're getting to do what they actually want to do. Because I think one thing that a lot of people are not acknowledging enough right now is how actually creatively unsatisfied the majority of animation professionals are right now. People don't talk about that and they only
Yeah.
talk about stability and security, but it's like, no, that matters more,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. 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 That
you know,
that's a
I
whole different topic, man. I just get lit up by your statement just now. Just kind of
oh,
like
cool. Yeah,
when you're grinding like on production to production, you're doing the thing,
yeah,
you're doing art, yes, for sure.
yeah.
And you're like, yeah, I'm doing
You're
art and I'm
happy?
working in animation. But when you can like do your own thing, it gets
Yeah.
like some traction or anything like that. It's like completely different, dude.
It's a completely different frequency. Yeah, because it's
Mm,
like I talk to so many animation people and even my astrology human design clients, I would say like a good third of them are animation people. So I get to listen to their stories a lot, and that's certainly a privilege. And I'm just like, is no one happy right now in the animation? Like everyone
bruh.
complains about their job and they don't
Yeah.
like their boss. They don't feel appreciated at their job. They're super burned out. They're getting carpal tunnel. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, that's
Yeah.
not the way to live, you know? Why do you want that? I often make the comparison of like, I don't know why my mind is going here,
No,
but
you're
it's
good. You're
like,
good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let
um,
your mind go, dog.
like how like coal miners, if you have to shut down like a coal mine to replace it with renewable green energy, for example, even if those coal mines are suffering in their job and they're inhaling bad particles and their life is in danger all the time, and it's like, no, green energy is going to be good for the planet, it's going to be better for your health, you don't have to go into this dangerous like dark space all the time, they're gonna be very unhappy. It's like, why are you taking my job away? Why are you taking this one thing that I know away? When it's like, it's literally killing you, you know? And that's kind of how I see what's happening in animation right now, where it's like, you're not actually happy doing the thing that you're doing in animation, but you're holding on to it so tight when there's a better alternative over here, because that's all we know. That's the only thing that we've known. And so it's really going to require thinking outside of the box right now. But
100%,
um
man. I agree with
yeah, that's
you. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
100%, man. And I think I think largely it's anytime there's something that kind of like um goes against the grain of just kind of like what you're used to like day to day, that can only kind of bring you make you better. I mean, like for me, honestly, Minkyu, I mean like the yeah, I was in development for at Disney for 3.5 years and that kind of stuff, like making my show. And then when we stopped that, I had to kind of reorient a little bit. So that's why I'm kind of saying I'm just like I'm also scared as well. I'm also uncertain. I'm also kind of have a ton of anxiety because you kind of like go from um you're going from a secure place at Disney development, and then you're going out there and pitching your projects to the world. And by
Right.
the world, I mean Hollywood. And
Right.
by Hollywood, I mean just like you have like heroes and villains in your corner, but it's been a wild one, man. And so like I I relate to you a little bit because you we both kind of got out of it. We could have been at Disney forever for 30 years as animators, but we wanted to share our voice with the world and tell our stories and direct and all that kind of stuff. And
Mhm.
once you do that, you're kind of like placed in the crosshairs of like Hollywood, and then
Yeah.
you kind of have to like build that like thick skin and endurance and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not complaining, but it is a thing. It's just a different life,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm sure that you've experienced that too. Just kind of pitching around
Oh, totally.
that kind of stuff,
Yeah. Yeah. I
dude.
mean, yeah,
You're
for
right.
sure. I mean,
Yeah.
many people know that like I just recently left Netflix, and I mean not recently, that was 2 years ago. That was 2022.
Yeah.
And a very similar experience. And I think, that's why it is so important to be in the correct environment.
Right.
And when I look back, the big lie that I was fed to by the animation industry is like, in order for you to make your film, you have to jump through all these hoops. You have to get all these green lights. Here's like the whole group of people that you have to satisfy.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality for me was, but those are not my people. Those are not my audience.
Mm,
They are not the
mm,
people that creativity is authentically going to be appreciated by. Why am
mm,
I satisfying?
mm-hmm.
you know
Mm.
um and it's going to
Gotcha, gotcha,
become
gotcha.
increasingly more so. I think that divide between artist and executive is going to become that gap is going to be wider because
Yep.
studios mandates are going to continue. I mean, we even saw that Pixar news like a month ago or so, right, that they're only
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
going to do more prize-based stuff. It's going to be that times 10,
Yeah, yeah.
and I don't want to work on Mario movie 2 ever. Like I can feel how frustrating of an experience that's going to be for me, in my
Yeah.
creativity. And so,
Yeah.
you know, uh but it is so easy when you are in Hollywood and you are surrounded by a certain group of people and they're
Yeah.
all saying in unison, well, if you want to make a film, then you're going to have to pitch to here,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and you're going to
yeah.
have to adjust your pitch this way. Well,
100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's gonna be for
Yeah.
quadrant, when it's like, yeah, and we tried that, right? Like I tried that, and where did it end up? Like the film didn't get made. Like I believed in this old world strategic way of trying to make my dreams come true, and it ended up nowhere.
Mm,
Meanwhile, on the flip side, when you just follow your authentic voice and be uncompromising with who you surround yourself with, then I think you're actually going to be able to meet that dream. And I
mm,
think we are going to see more and more example of people doing that.
mm.
But
Can I
yeah,
ask you
it's
a like personal question? Do you kind of feel
yeah.
like with your pedigree, do you kind of feel like a pressure to represent for your culture?
Um, I did a lot more in the past. I
Yeah.
think now I'm at a point where if I feel any sort of creative pressure
Mm,
that is kind of, that is feeling like pressure rather than genuine, authentic inspiration, then I
mhm,
just say no to it, because I just know that the end result is going to be frustrating or dissatisfying or not what I want it to be. And the only way I'm going to get to put out the drawing or the story or the film or the graphic novel that I want to is
mhm,
if I am genuinely inspired, like it's
mm,
real inspiration. Um, and I think uh, if I'm feeling some sort of pressure of representation, and I cave to that, and then I do that to ease that pressure, then the falseness of that or the inauthenticity of that is
Mm.
going to, I
Show
think it's
itself.
going to reek from
Yeah.
the, yeah, show up from the final product, and people are going to
Mm.
be able to sense it. They're going to be like, this feel like, that's why I think now suddenly there is so much conversation about like, corporate inclusion, and when a film strategically includes diversity for not authentic reasons, but for like corporate strategic reasons to not get canceled or to whatever,
100%. Yeah, yeah.
it feels off. You're like, why are
Yeah.
you doing that? That's not what we want, and I don't think people are acknowledging that side enough. Like I
Mm.
believe that's real. So for me, it's interesting. Once I shed all of that, like I'm not gonna do a Korean story just because I'm Korean. I absolutely not set that away. And once I just follow my genuine, authentic inspiration, I'm
Mm.
noticing that side of my identity or upbringing or heritage is showing up in a much more natural way, if that makes
Mm.
sense, without
Mm-hmm.
it being forced, you know?
100%. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so to answer your question, I used to more. Now I just do not, you know, like don't condone it in any way. Do not inch, but like
Yeah.
because I am Korean American, but Korean, um, it's already in there, I feel like, in a
Yeah.
way. And if there ever is like a real Korea-based story that I want to tell, then it's going to come very naturally,
Mm.
without me. I know that if I am meant to tell that story, then I'm never going to have to force it, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you have like a swan song thing that you want to do before you die?
Yeah, well, yeah, kind of like a magnum opus or
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. Like,
100%.
oh, absolutely, yeah, and
Dude.
then I'm
You don't have to say
unbelievable.
you don't have to say it
No,
now,
no,
but
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
One of the things, one of the big lessons that I've learned being, I like how many years have I been in the industry?
5.
2008. Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, like um however many years I've been in the industry, the big lesson that I learned is like, don't put what you want to do away in the future. Do it now. Because we
Mm,
all have that, like, oh yeah, one day I want to make this big feature film or whatever, but I'm building up to it.
mm,
We tend to defer our
mm-hmm,
actual dreams. Like we tend to like push it away into the future.
mm-hmm.
And that is going to keep you in inauthenticity and frustration, in a frustration loop over and over again. You have to find a way to do it now,
Mm-hmm,
and so I am working on it now, the magnum opus, because I have to get it out now. I'm not putting it away in the future. So
mm-hmm.
um yeah, so I'm working on that right now.
You're gonna die tomorrow. Both of us will. So one of the things I wanted to leave on, thank you for your time, man. Thank you. That was wonderful, man. And so one of the things that I really responded to and is kind of in vibe with like Rise Up Animation is when you said creating more options for yourself also creates options for other people. Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Because A, just from just the most obvious example, like the more you do your own thing and get to do it, other people are going to go, oh, hey, I always thought you only had to do it this way, but look at this other person who's doing it a different way. I could do that too. So it actually gives people more options that they hadn't considered before. And I think now more than ever, that's going to be so important because people right now need options. And the majority of people out there aren't going to believe that anything else is viable unless they see it.
Mm,
And so that's going to be important. But also, even just my example of wanting to find another animation community or creative community or hub or art town or whatever you want to call it outside of LA, suddenly
Yep.
that's going to be an option for other people too, is my hope at least. But
Yep.
um that's so yeah, I think now more than ever, carving out your own path is going to be this thing where even though it is you um, practicing a lot of self-respect and self-love and autonomy, it's going to be beneficial for others way more so
Yep.
than, you getting a job at a studio.
Mm-hmm. 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 I think that's the biggest takeaway that I took away. Biggest takeaway that I took away from your podcast is just kind of like, listen, as things kind of evolve a little bit, like if you can um be a little bit independent from like a studio system or just kind of like a freelance thing or anything like that, and just kind of like provide um your own brand, or it doesn't even have to be an IG brand, but just kind of like be your own kind of creator independently of like what any studio has to say. That'll serve
Yeah.
you well like moving forward, don't you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I hope people who are wanting to enter the animation industry now will be able to, because when you're younger, and I think this is the one thing that I think people might not realize more is that the younger generations are going to be a little bit more open to these ideas.
Yeah.
It's really the older generations that are so set in a certain way of making animated films that
Hmm.
they're going to be the ones that are harder to um they're going to have a harder time kind of being a little bit more fluid and adaptive. I actually think the strength in the younger generations that are coming up is they're going to be able to be like, oh yeah, totally, I can do that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can see
yeah.
it just in like the general workforce. When you
Yeah,
look at the
yeah,
general workforce, it's Gen Z who's saying, no, I'm not going to do that job. Even
yeah.
though yeah, I'm desperate with money, but I'm not going to do that because that's not
Right,
me. And
right,
I'm
right, right, right.
that is the
Yeah.
strength. That is the power. Because the older generations would have been like, yeah, but I gotta suck it up and I gotta go to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
job that
yeah.
I hate because it's gonna, it's gonna help with my retirement, whatever. Like
Hmm.
that's the danger there. That's what's not good. But I actually think a lot of people who are younger who are actually listening to this have that in them. They have that in them to be like, yeah, I'm gonna go away and yeah, that sounds good. I'm not gonna work on Mario Movie 2. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Whatever the case may be.
100%. And that's one of the things too, man, of just kind of like when you're talking about like creating more options for yourself, also creates options
Mhm.
for other people. You do not know, like when you have a dream and you succeed at it and you work hard at it, um the fact that everyone's looking at that can mean
Yeah.
so much to them, man. And I remember even when your project, when it got announced, I'm just I was so inspired by it, regardless of what happened after, the
Right.
fact that
Yeah.
you put in the work
Yeah.
to make that kind of happen is just so inspiring, and like you said, creating options for yourself. You're independent of a studio. You were Minkyu Lee. You were not Minkyu Lee of Disney Frozen or
Hey.
Wreck-It Ralph or anything like that. You were freaking Minkyu Lee, and you're a creator, and you're making this thing. And I looked at that, bro, and honestly, I was like, I could do it too. I mean, I know Minkyu.
Yeah.
I
Oh
know
my
him.
God, I love that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's that's it for me. When other people see what I do and they feel like, oh, I can do that too. That's it. That's all I hope. Yeah,
I,
for
I
sure.
Yeah, 100%. And whatever you do in the future, whatever I do in the future, I think that's like a big driver. Obviously trying to
Mhm.
get that shit made, but like what you said before, like creating more options for yourself also creates options for other people. That is deep, man, because they can see that and they can like be optimistic about that.
Yeah.
And so, like, to wrap it up, man, honestly, I mean, like, you go on IG and everything like that, and for students and upcoming artists right now, I think it's just bleak. So if we can provide a little bit of like a light or encouragement or just actionable steps and not being Pollyanna about it and that kind of stuff. This is what you can do, this, and this, and this. I think would help the community, man. So
Yeah. Well, I feel very optimistic about the future, and
yeah,
you know,
you seem so. Yeah.
I am honestly excited. I'm like, no, guys, all the problems are gonna get fixed. You know, we were so unhappy. We don't have to be coal miners anymore, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I think
Yeah, yeah.
again, like a lot of it is going to connect to our actual desires, you know. Just one example that I talk about in my other podcast that I now do on my Substack and Patreon is like, you
Hmm.
know, even just what I shared earlier about like, you know, the breakdown of megacities or things like that. When you just listen to that tidbit from the perspective of fear, then you're going to start becoming like, oh my God, really? Like LA is not going to be as livable as it is right now. What do I have
Yeah,
to
yeah,
do? Do I
yeah,
need to
yeah, yeah.
get a job somewhere? Like suddenly you're going to go into this fear-based decision making, and that's always going to put you in the wrong place. It's always going to be opposite to authentic decision making.
Yep.
But um, just before I leave to share this, like so many of the clients that I see, they often share things like, you know, there are some days that I just want to quit everything and I just want to move to someplace closer to nature and just
Dude,
like have my own
all of us.
home and garden my own thing and live more peaceful, like slower pace of life, eat healthier food. Like, and I'm like, yeah, that could be like something. You don't have to like go cold turkey about it and just
Yeah,
flip, like buy something tomorrow, but that
yeah.
could be a correct dream that is being planted for you that is actually leading you the right way. And so, and it's not like you have to ever give up animation. That's the other thing, you know, like
Mm,
I tell everyone, like following my dream of wanting to become an astrologer or a human design reader, it didn't take time away from animation, but
mm.
ironically, it allows me to only do the animated films that I want to do, which is my own films. You know, it becomes
Yeah,
like its
yeah,
own funding source of like, wow, now I
yeah,
actually get to do what I want to do. And
yeah.
this other thing, astrology and human design thing, isn't even a job to me because I love it too, you
Yeah,
know?
let's go. Yeah, yeah.
That's another, you know, example of like having more options to for yourself.
Hmm.
Um, it's a very empowering thing. It empowers you to do only what you want to do instead of having to compromise your integrity to survive, you know? And so I really believe there's a way in which, you know, our new dreams that are being seeded right now are like a compass to a much happier life. And again, where we don't have to ever give up animation, you know?
Right. Is that what you
Yeah.
is that what you would say to young Minkyu getting out of CalArts? Like,
Yeah, I would 1000%. I mean, it's interesting because I don't regret my career in animation so far, even with, you know, the separations and projects not materializing, because I think I had to go through that experience to really see, oh, this really doesn't work, you
yeah.
know, and we're all being collectively fed that this works, but it actually works for a very small minority of people.
Yeah.
When you think about the actual directors and showrunners who get to make their shows and films, that's a very tiny little percentage of,
Yeah.
you know, everyone who's involved in animation who wants to do their own thing too, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's a certain group of people whose tastes align with the current studio paradigm that get to do that.
Mm.
Um, and my kind of false thinking, I think, was that I had to still test out to see to believe was that, you know, but I also think my feature film that's so different from what we've seen before in at Disney or DreamWorks or Cartoon Network or whatever. I
Hmm.
think that's still going to be very meaningful and very
Hmm.
resonant with a lot of people. And if I
Hmm.
just get to then I get to then I think that will be enough to change the animation industry. Um,
Let's go, man.
yeah, but I
Oh
think
yeah,
that
man. I love it.
yeah, like it's
Dude,
like
dude.
That's all
That's awesome,
true,
man.
but
I do not want to discount what you just said. That's fucking rad, man. I
no, no,
love it.
I know,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah. Dude, good,
the
good.
extra thing that I would add on top of that is that yes, that's true, but just don't do it through the traditional studio system that you already know is full of people who only want this one thing. And like even going back to like the whole options, creating options for yourself, like even think about like Miyazaki, who has Studio Ghibli, right?
Mhm.
Like imagine if he didn't exist. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
we would
yeah,
only really have that, like we wouldn't be even able to imagine that there are other types of animated films possible. But
yeah.
he created Nausicaa. He created his own graphic novel, did his own thing, and that was able to resonate
Mhm.
with some executive in Japan, and that was able to get funding. And so it's like
Yeah,
what I want to say is that something like Nausicaa now, of course, no studio in the US would ever greenlight that. But doesn't matter because he still got to create Studio Ghibli in his own terms.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
I I feel like that's closer to the future model where it's like just do the thing that you want to do now. Tell the story that you want to do now. You don't even know who might come in or how like the right connections that might happen, the doors that might open that might actually connect you to the right investor, the right group of people that could make it a possibility.
yep.
Yeah, most likely it's probably going to be somewhere else. It's probably not going to be in
Yeah,
Hollywood,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
that's better. That's even better.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
that's where I,
mm-hmm.
you know,
It
leave it.
it is wild that the experience that you had so far and that you strive to kind of like make your voice heard as a director, as an auteur, like moving forward. That's super inspiring, man. And it's very rare. I mean, like all of us 95% of us in the animation industry are just gonna work until we die in this studio system. But you divorce
Yeah.
yourself from that. You're an artist. You're like, I want to say something more, and I want to kind of like forge my own path and all that kind of stuff. Even if that means like what you talked about in your podcast of just kind of like maybe financial instability, but dude, like
But
oh,
in the longer
it,
run, it's more financially stable too, because it's actually the studio jobs that's going to be the financial instability option. So again,
fair,
it's
fair,
a lot of changes, but
fair, fair, fair.
yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I have a very optimistic side about everything. I think
That's what I loved about the conversation you had in your podcast, and that the conversation we're having now is just kind of like things can look bleak, and I'm sure we can get into the nuts and bolts of like AI and Karen and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, what would it serve you to obsess over that negatively? Nothing. And so positively, the only thing we can do is kind of like move forward, control. We can control and kind of like control our own portfolio quality and like how we're the quality of the shows that we're pitching around. I'm speaking from experience, and
yeah, yeah.
and then kind of go from there, man. Oh my gosh.